I still can't process what happened to me 3 years ago. My stepmother convinced my father to throw me out of the house I grew up in, claiming I was a negative influence on her children. 3 years later, when she tried to use the property as collateral for a loan, she discovered the shocking truth about who really owned it. I'm still reeling from it all. This might sound unbelievable, but I swear it's true. I'm Ethan, 25 now, and I still can't fathom how my own father kicked me out of my childhood home without a second thought, all because of my stepmother's manipulations. And that wasn't the end of it. The real shock came later when I learned I was the actual owner of the house the whole time. You won't believe how it all unfolded. Let me take you back to the start. Growing up, life was good. My dad, James, was my rock. My mom passed away when I was young, and I relied heavily on my dad. When I was 15, he married Clara. At first, I didn't mind. I wasn't overjoyed, but Clara seemed decent enough. She had 2 kids, Emma and Noah, who were a bit younger than me. We didn't exactly bond, but we weren't at odds either. I made an effort to get along. We had our share of conflicts, but that's just family life, isn't it? Over time, though, I started picking up on Clara's quirks. She had a controlling streak, always making sly remarks when no one else was around, especially about how I was too wild or too independent. It felt like I was constantly treading carefully around her. I didn't think much of it at first, just stepmom stuff, trying to figure out how to deal with someone who wasn't her own kid. I wasn't perfect either. I was a teenager with a bit of attitude, but I never imagined it would lead to what happened next. Here's the part that still blows my mind. One evening, I came home from my part-time job, and the house felt off. It was unnaturally quiet. I thought maybe my dad and Clara were upstairs, but then I saw it. My belongings, clothes, books, everything were packed up. I stood there stunned, thinking it had to be a mistake. Then my dad, James, stepped out of the living room. I asked what was happening, and he just told me to leave. No warmth, no reasoning. He simply said, "It's time for you to go." Clara was behind him, her face unreadable, like she was waiting for me to explode. I was at a loss for words. I hadn't done anything wrong, no arrests, no trouble at school. I was just living my life. But my dad, my own dad, was telling me to get out like it was nothing. And Clara just stood there silent. When I pressed for a reason, James said, "You're a bad influence on Emma and Noah. You're causing too much strain here. It's better if you leave." I couldn't believe my ears. A bad influence. What did that even mean? I'd always tried to be kind to Emma and Noah, even though they weren't the easiest to connect with. I figured maybe they didn't like me because I was their mom's stepson, but I'd never hurt them. And I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. My dad just repeated that I needed to pack and go. That was it. No discussion, no hint of what had changed, just leave. So that's how it happened. At 22, I was thrown out of my own home, left to figure out how to survive. No heads up, no conversation, just gone. I'll never forget that moment. My entire world turned upside down in an instant. It was crushing. I had nowhere to turn. I ended up staying with friends, scraping by. All I could think about was my dad. How could he do this? How could he just believe Clara without giving me a chance to speak? It felt like he didn't care anymore. At first, I thought it might be a misunderstanding. Maybe Clara had twisted things and he didn't see the full picture. But as time passed, I realized this wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was his choice. He trusted her. He believed I was the problem. I didn't even know my own dad anymore. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came when I learned what Clara had been doing behind my back. Months later, as I was starting to piece my life together, I found out Clara was telling people the house was hers. She claimed James had gifted it to her, and they were planning to sell it to fund their future. I was stunned when I heard this. The house, my childhood home, the place that had been in our family for years, she was acting like it was hers to gain sympathy and look like the hero. Why lie like that? And then I discovered something that flipped everything upside down. The house wasn't even in my dad's name. It was in mine. I didn't know it at the time, but while sorting through some old documents for legal reasons, I found the deed. It turned out my dad had transferred the house to me years ago during a financial rough patch to shield it from creditors. For some reason, he never told me. I had been the legal owner all along. Can you imagine how that felt? I was kicked out of my own house, forced to leave with nothing, and it was mine the whole time. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. Part of me wanted to confront my dad, but another part just wanted to walk away from it all. I was furious, hurt, and utterly betrayed. My own father hadn't told me, and Clara was acting like she owned the place. I didn't know what to do with this revelation at first. It was overwhelming, but one thing was certain. This wasn't as simple as I'd thought. I wasn't the one in the wrong. And when I realized that, it was the start of everything shifting. Update. If you've been following my story, you know my dad, James, kicked me out of my childhood home, saying I was a bad influence on his new family. That was bad enough, but what happened next? It's a wild ride, and it didn't end with that first betrayal. It got worse. The first few months after being kicked out were a blur of confusion. At 22, I was suddenly homeless, in a sense. I wasn't rolling in money, so I couch-surfed at friends' places. I wasn't on the streets, but it felt like I'd lost my home. I'd never prepared for something like this. One day, I was living in what I thought was my house. The next, I was scrambling to find a place to sleep. In those early days, I couldn't stop thinking about my dad. We hadn't had a big fight or anything. He just turned his back on me. I kept hoping maybe Clara had manipulated him, made him see things her way. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he chose to believe her, and I couldn't accept that. My dad had been my anchor. Growing up, it was just us after my mom passed. He meant everything to me, and now I didn't know him. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Angry? Definitely. Sad, for sure, but also heartbroken. That's the hardest part to admit. My dad shattered my trust in the most unexpected way. So I spent months crashing on couches, moving between places, barely getting by. I took on a couple of part-time jobs, doing whatever I could to stay afloat. It wasn't great, but it was survival. Some days I felt like I was barely holding on. I'd lie awake wondering what happened to my life. Was this really it? Living with this betrayal weighing me down? But here's where it gets even crazier. One day, I was venting to a friend about everything, and he mentioned he'd overheard Clara talking about the house. Apparently, she was telling people she and my dad were going to sell it. She even claimed she owned it outright. My house. The place I grew up in. And she was acting like it was hers. I was floored. How could she pretend it was hers? That was my home, my memories. The place where I spent years with my dad. Knowing she was claiming it while I was crashing on couches made me feel like the ground had vanished beneath me. But it gets worse. A few weeks later, I bumped into an old neighbor while passing through the area. They mentioned hearing Clara talk about using the house to secure a loan. She was planning to use it as collateral for some personal loan. My heart sank. She was using my childhood home, my safe haven, to get money. I won't lie, something in me broke. I was livid. I felt like I was drowning in lies and manipulation. I started thinking about how my dad had just gone along with it, how he'd let her do this to me. For the first time, I saw how deep Clara's influence ran. And the worst part, I wasn't sure if my dad even cared about me anymore. The more I looked into it, the clearer it became that Clara was trying to take everything from me. She'd told everyone the house was hers, was trying to get loans with it, and was doing it all behind my back. And my dad, he was letting it happen. I decided to dig into the legal side of things. I didn't know what was going on, but I needed to know who really owned the house. At this point, I just wanted answers. I wasn't sure if it mattered anymore, but I had to find out. So I reached out to a lawyer. I needed to take back control of this mess. I'll never forget the day I learned the truth. I was going through some old documents I'd kept in storage, papers I'd never really looked at. And there it was, the deed to the house, in my name. I was the legal owner, not James, not Clara. The shock hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe for a second. The house was mine. My dad had put it in my name years ago during a financial crisis, but he never told me. And now I realized everything, the betrayal, the lies, being kicked out, was for nothing. The house was mine, and no one knew. At first, I didn't know what to do with this knowledge. Part of me was still processing the pain of it all. How could my dad keep this from me? Why didn't he warn me? But another part was just furious. I wasn't going to let this slide, not now. Not after everything Clara had done, but even with the truth, confronting my dad was hard. I felt so betrayed, and yet I still loved him. I wanted to believe he'd come around, that he'd see how wrong he was. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same. The emotional weight was hard to describe. I wanted justice, closure, but also to fix things with my dad. It felt impossible. I wasn't sure if I could forgive him or if I even wanted to. I didn't tell Clara I knew yet. I was still figuring out my next move, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had to take charge. I had the power now, and I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd been through. Final update. It's been a wild few months since I discovered the house was mine. Honestly, I was still in disbelief at first. The anger and betrayal still burned, but now I had something stronger. The truth. The house was legally mine, and Clara had been trying to pass it off as hers to get a loan. It felt like I was stuck in a twisted drama, but this was my life. I wasn't just sitting in my anger anymore. I had a choice to make. Do I confront my dad, try to mend things with him, or take this chance to get justice and reclaim what was mine? I didn't know the answer, but I knew I couldn't let Clara get away with it. She'd lied to everyone, manipulated my dad's trust, and nearly taken everything from me. That wasn't going to stand. The first step was deciding what to do with the house. I didn't want to live there anymore, not after everything. But I knew if I let Clara keep using it as leverage, she'd never stop. So I decided it was time to face her. The day I walked back into that house, my hands were trembling. It felt like stepping into a battlefield, but I wasn't scared anymore. I knew my truth. I had power. As I opened the door, I heard Clara's voice from the living room. It was surreal, like stepping back in time. This was my home where I grew up, and it had been warped into something else. Clara was on the couch talking to some man. When I walked in, she froze. I could see the moment she realized what was coming. Her face paled, and she stood up, trying to act calm but failing. "Ethan," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for the house," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I know everything. You've been trying to use it for a loan, acting like it's yours. I'm the owner, not you." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond right away. She was caught, and I could see her scrambling to figure out how to turn this around, but I wasn't letting her. I held up the legal documents from my lawyer. "This is the deed. The house is mine. I'm done being pushed around." Clara finally spoke, her voice sharp. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, trying to stay composed. "James and I have been planning to sell this place for months. It's our decision. You don't get a say anymore." I couldn't believe her nerve. She was still acting like she was in charge, like she could bulldoze me, but I wasn't backing down. "Your plan is done, Clara," I said. "I'm finished letting you lie about what's mine. It's time you face the truth." She crossed her arms, clinging to whatever control she thought she had, but I wasn't the scared kid anymore. I wasn't going to let her steamroll me. The truth was mine, and I was going to make sure she knew it. "I don't want the house," I said. "I'm done with this place, but I'm not letting you sell it and act like you earned this life. I'm selling it, and I'll make sure the money goes where it belongs. Not to you, not to James." Clara's face shifted from anger to something almost desperate. "You're really going to do this? You think your father will forgive you for taking everything from him?" Her words hit hard. I did care about my dad despite everything, but I wasn't letting her guilt trip me. Not anymore. "No," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for me, because I'm done with the lies and I'm done letting you control everything." Then the door opened and James walked in. He looked confused at first, then saw the papers in my hand and Clara's face. I could see panic creeping into his eyes. "Ethan, what's happening?" he asked, his voice unsteady. He glanced at me, then at Clara. "Clara's been lying, Dad," I said, keeping my voice even. "This house isn't hers, it's mine. You've been manipulated, and I'm not letting her use you anymore." James didn't speak at first, just stood there, looking between me and Clara. The silence was heavy. I didn't know," James said finally, his voice breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was helping. I never wanted you to leave, Ethan." Hearing that hurt like a knife. He didn't want me to leave. Then why didn't he stand up for me? Why didn't he see what Clara was doing? "I'm sorry, Ethan," James said softly. "I should have protected you. I should have known better." It was too late for apologies. I wasn't angry anymore, just exhausted. Exhausted from fighting, from feeling like I wasn't enough, from always picking up the pieces. So I did what I needed to do. I sold the house. It wasn't about the money or the house itself. It was about closing this chapter. I sold it to a developer and the payout was substantial, but I didn't keep any of it. I put the money into a trust, one that was mine alone, not for James or Clara. I wasn't going to let them profit from my pain.